Welcome to the Stretch to Go podcast. My name is Ian Ray, your host. Today I have Brent Meredith, based out of Los Angeles, California. He is the founder of Onday Shoes. Brent, welcome to the Stretch to Go podcast.
Hey, Ian, thanks for having me today. Great to be here.
Yes. So, question I always ask people is, what made you get into creating a barefoot shoe brand? And first of all, how did you get into barefoot shoes?
Yeah, so my story goes back to when Vibram FiveFingers first kind of came out. I was still in school at the time in California, and I was studying exercise and health science in undergrad. And I've always had flat feet. I ran track in high school. I played tennis, and I always kind of had varying degrees of like leg pain here and there that was chalked up to growing pains and other things. I was always felt like I was inflexible compared to my peers. I didn't really start to understand why, but I had a professor in school that, talked a lot about biomechanics. We went into kinesiology, all the bones and muscles, and I started to kind of learn about how, the body's really just a series of levers and muscles and things pulling on each other. And he made a really great analogy that kind of stuck with me my whole life, which was, the human body is built a lot like a machine or an engine. And, if one part is off, it creates a cascade of problems through the rest of the machine. So obviously, when I started getting into Born to Run, the famous book that kind of kicked off the barefoot movement, I got into barefoot shoes, started wearing Vibram FiveFingers, and I did not take them off. I wore them consistently for about 4 or 5 years. And, I ran in them and I was like, I saw some benefit, but I didn't see all the benefit that I really wanted to. I still had flat feet, and there weren't all the other cool brands that are out now that are like teaching people how to like train their foot. So I did fall off of it a little bit for a little while. The story continues, maybe a few years ago, where I actually broke my wrist, and I broke my wrist snowboarding, and I had a cast put on for the very first time. I'd never worn a cast before. And, when I got that cast off, I couldn't move my hand and wrist the same way at all anymore. And that kind of mental connection between the mind-body connection that everybody in fitness talks about, like that brain-body connection, literally was gone. And I was like going through PT, and I started thinking about my feet again. I looked down at my feet one night and I was like, my feet forgot how to move too. And I found toe spacers. And then I can tell the rest of the story later, but I kind of started getting back into barefoot shoes and cascading back that. But, if you do it from start to finish, barefoot shoes have been a part of my life since I was about 20 years old.
Okay. So you didn't mind standing out amongst your peers wearing Vibrams?
I did not. And in fact, if you go back to San Francisco, I lived in San Francisco for about 7 years.
Uh-huh.
You could probably find somebody on, I forget what street I was on, but you could probably find someone that remembers this crazy guy that used to wear Vibram FiveFingers and sprint down the street. I would do sprints and Vibrams on the streets of San Francisco because there's not a lot of space there. So
yeah,
that's what I did.
How did you come up with the name Onday Shoes? What's the meaning behind it?
So it turns out that if you're starting a company in the clothing or footwear industry, that it has to be pretty unique because everybody and their mother starts a clothing company. And so every name or so has been patented. I really liked Onday because, the first time I tried toe spacers, I felt like I was like, this is my Onday. Like I'm having an Onday today. So that's kind of the genesis of the brand's name. And it's also kind of ties back to the toe spacer component that's built into the shoes, because for me personally, my toes were cramped together my whole life and likely deformed permanently because of it. I have a tailor's bunion on my pinky toe, and toes are generally pretty cramped together. And when I put those toe spacers on, I felt like that was the missing link for me, and I called it my Onday.
Yeah. Okay. Another thing too is that your background professionally right now, I know you're in sales, right? Yeah. So like people who are in like say desk jobs tend to probably, get a lot of, they probably aren't looking at their feet a lot. Obviously they're, probably get low back pain, hip pain and whatnot. But I just found it interesting that, you kind of came into this and I guess you're working synonymously doing a career in sales and of course building this brand. It's just you, but how hard is it, man? Like just trying to build a brand from scratch, and just you're the guy pushing everything and doing everything and whatnot.
Yeah, man. So yeah, I'm in B2B software sales for my entire career spent my life behind a desk and a lot of that time cramped into leather shoes that don't look foot shaped at all the while going to the gym at like 6 in the morning, getting to work and doing the whole thing. I think for anyone out there trying to start a company and like has a dream to do something bigger with their life, take it one step at a time. You know, I love what I do. I think technology is super interesting, but my passion's always been health and fitness. It started with that studies in university, and I wanted to give back to the world in a meaningful way. And I always want to do that. The software is fulfilling and all, it pays well, and like that's fine. But like how I've always wanted to, have some kind of greater fulfillment. My dad knew what he wanted to do since he was 8 years old. He's an architect, designs houses for custom homes, beautiful homes, and he loves doing it. And when I thought of Onday, I was like, this is something I can make a difference with. And I think that little bit of extra motivation gets you past working the long hours. Having that sense of purpose is something that you believe that can really help a lot of people, gets you through those long hours. And also not being too hard on yourself. No one's really good at something the first time they do it. I had 2 managers tell me that I wasn't cut out for sales earlier in my career. And I made a tremendous career for myself out of it in the long run and became very good at it. So, just having that grit and that grind and believing yourself and not having anybody tell you that you're not good enough or you can't do it. Like the first people I started talking about on there were like toe spacers and shoes. Like I didn't really care what people thought. I was like, no, this is a good idea. It might flop, but I'm going to try it. And if it doesn't work out, I can say at least I tried. And that's kind of what gets you through the long nights, I think.
I used to be in sales for a number of years right out of college, from insurance to I was in fintech. Gosh, so many. I was doing sales for a number of years until I got into doing my practice. What I do now at fascia. So I understand. I mean, it's a grind. It's taking a lot of rejection, and mentally, I think it kind of helped me set up to where I'm at right now with starting my own practice, because you have to go out there and spread awareness. Obviously what you're doing, you're spreading awareness and educating people the importance of it. And I think that kind of helped me a lot translate. Sales has really translated to doing what I'm doing right now currently, even though I'm technically, I mean, everything you do is sales related. You're always trying to educate, trying to solve a problem, and really giving them a solution. And so I think what you're doing here on is you saw a benefit, but you saw a problem, which was, you know, having to wear toe spacers in a shoe, and now you created this brand. So let's kind of shift gear now. What went into creating these shoes that have these built-in toe spacers?
Yeah, yeah. So a lot went into it. Obviously, it's there's nothing. I couldn't go to a factory and say, hey, print me this shoe from this thing you made 100,000 times. That everything had to be made custom. But it really started with me wanting to wear toe spacers more. When I looked at my foot and I looked at other people's feet that like had never worn shoes before. You Google indigenous people's feet; their toes are pretty spread out, and I remember seeing this guy like climb up a coconut tree, like no problem. And like this guy climb up a mountain, like no problem, like barefoot. I'm like, this is kind of crazy. There's something going on here. And kind of rediscovering that for myself and trying toe spacers for the first time. For me, it actually started solving a lot of leg pain that I had, up in the tendons and the knees and stuff. And my calves started to feel better. I was able to do some, moves I'd never been able to do before, like a pistol squat. And I wanted to wear them everywhere. And I tried wearing them in shoes, and they would kind of like slip out from between my toes, and they weren't performing what I wanted to do. So I was like, there's got to be something where this is embedded in the shoe, and I couldn't find it. I started with, well, like, how do I make a shoe that has toe spacers in it? And the first problem was like, well, one, it doesn't exist, and two, the shoe is going to have to open up a lot wider than a normal shoe. Well, the first part of the journey was just kind of actually getting down on a notepad. And I still have the drawing somewhere. It's actually on a blog on our website. I took a picture and put it on the blog, but there's a picture of the first drawing I drew of the Onday shoe. And it's kind of this fabric that kind of opens up and then like folds over the foot. And the original design had like an insole with toe spacers just sticking out of it. You put your foot into the shoe first, position the toe spacers, and then go from there. that initial design got adjusted because one, we wanted it to be modular. We wanted to be able to have two different types of spacers, maybe three or four, and different arrangements of them in the future, and varying degrees of thickness. And two, you had to be able to like easily put it on no matter what your mobility level was. Like myself or someone who's young, who's flexible, can easily bend over to put on a shoe and like kind of fiddle with a spacer and like finagle it on, and like they'll figure it out. But someone who's older and much less mobile is not going to have that benefit. And I didn't want to exclude those people from our customer base. I want something that's accessible and easy. So the two biggest design changes that we made to the shoe was one, the wide zipper opening. So you can see here the shoe, the first model here, which is Onday 1, opens very wide. It pulls out almost within like, call it 2 or 3 inches of the toe box. And then the second major design change we made from that initial was putting a strap over the insole. So you can put it on a lot like you would just a sandal, and you position your toes between the spacers, or space between your toes. And then you can just slide it on and put it right into the shoe, and then you zip it up and you're ready to go. And then the modular design includes the spacer in the bottom, and you just pull them out, and then you can pop in. Every pair comes with a thinner spacer too. So this one is significantly thinner, is like our starter spacer, and then the blue one that was originally in it here is slightly thicker and allows for a thicker space between the toes. And then finding a factory that's willing to do that is a whole nother story, but we did it.
Oh gosh. Yeah, because I mean, they're used to creating. I mean, this is something I learned just from having this podcast, is like having a mold. Last, I should say. Last is, obviously for people who don't know, it's like how do you see in a mannequin, like that foot shape, a foot, and then they have to create a shoe, correct, based on that last. Is that how that?
There's a few components that go. Yeah, there's a few that go into it. The first component is the last. That's the general shape of the shoe and what the fabric kind of molds around. And then there's the outsole mold. A lot of companies, including some barefoot companies, there's generic molds out there these days that you can go get. For what we wanted to do, everything had to be, custom mold, custom last. Obviously additional molds for the spacers, and we also had to do an additional mold for even the insole, because the insole has the modular capability to it. So the Onday shoe, there's nothing kind of off the shelf about it, and taking other components into it, the zippers and stuff, like these factories, like they're like, you're crazy, and I'm like, sure, fine, let's do it. If you're gonna do it, if you're willing to do it, let's do it.
Yeah. So did you have to go to several factories? I mean, you probably went to visit a lot of them and pitching your idea, and I guess showing them your idea. Like, are you able to do this?
So I partner with a designer who is part of the company now, and he had some factory connections that we went to, and we did have to go to a few to find one that was willing to take it. But they've been great so far. They've been super supportive of what we're doing, and we have a really great setup now that enables us to produce really quickly and come out with new models and designs quickly. So it took a little bit of finessing, but they're on board.
Cool. So what makes Onday barefoot shoes unique in the marketplace? I know we talked about the zipper and how easy it is to just slip on. We talked about the toe spacers that's already built in with the insole, but there's something else I think that we could kind of talk about that's very unique, because one is that you have these insoles that you can just get more grounding, feel more of the grounding you don't have to. And you have this replacement insole too. So if people don't want to or transitioning into barefoot shoes, you also have this included. But I love that you have these different variations for people to transition into barefoot shoes.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll kind of start from the top, because there was a lot of thought that went into that, because one of my big reasons for starting on was I felt like there was a disconnect in the market. When someone like me, who has some degree of foot deformity, whether it's a tailor bunion, or maybe someone has a tailor's bunion and a full blown bunion, or their toes are just too cramped together, if you just take someone's foot like that and put them in a barefoot shoe, they're not going to see the benefit. I certainly I wore Vibram for a long time, and I did not see all the benefit that I think I should have and that I do now with toe spacers. And I think there's a lot of people out there, and for all the barefoot shoe companies out there, we spend a lot of time trying to educate the market on why barefoot's better. And if you get a customer in the door and they buy your shoes, and they have a foot like mine or have some other kind of deformity, which I'm willing to bet is a lot of people, they're not going to get the benefit right away and they might just give up on them. But if you give them a gradual way to like open their eyes to what they might be missing, which is that extra toe space, that extra stability, it really comes down to the tripod of the foot, and where that balance is, just like it would like a camera tripod. Is it going to be more stable like this or is it going to be more stable like this? The answer is pretty clear, but people don't think about their feet that way. So it needed to be something that was included in the shoe. It needed to be something that was gentle. That's why we have the really, really, what I consider really thin spacer. And then we have the thicker spacer to allow for people to kind of realize in one product. They don't need to buy it from two different places and try it together, experiencing the slippage and stuff. And it's not hard to get on the shoe and doesn't tangle up or bunch up in the shoe. Like it's just there. And the grounded part of it ensures it's not going to move around. So we wanted a product that was going to really help people understand the benefit of barefoot. And I felt like that was the missing link. We had to have, the toe spacer piece is a big differentiator, but it's also people might look at it and be like, oh, well, I don't want that. Or I don't know about that, but I like the way the shoe looks. So we had to have a way to make the product appealing to everybody. So that's why you see us including so much in this initial product. We have the insole that includes the spacers. We have the extra insoles that don't have spacers that come with the shoe with every pair. And then we also have the shoe itself is lined. I mean, the black pair it doesn't show up that well, but the beige pair you have right there, if you open it up, you can see that liner inside is, the fabric as well. And that gives you like, if you really want that the closest to the ground connection, like you're only a few millimeters off the ground with that. So from that perspective, Onday is probably the most diverse barefoot shoe you can buy on the market right now. Just in one product.
Interesting facts too. Like,
I don't know if that answered the question. I rambled a bit.
No, that answered all my questions for that portion. I noticed too with yours, it's so breathable with the material because of the mesh, right? You have a mesh out layer of the forefoot on the sides. And then the zipper obviously was just so that people can fit in easily with these toe spacer insoles. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was a core part of the design because, if it's not easy to put on, some of our less mobile folks and customers might have trouble with it. My father's 76 years old, and just putting on regular shoes can kind of be a struggle sometimes. And he also has overlapping toes, so he has foot problems there. And I wanted a product that would be really easy for everybody to use. And then from a breathability standpoint, I mean, it goes out saying like barefoot shoes, if you're wearing shoes that are barefoot, they can sometimes smell. And that was my experience with some other brands out there. And I didn't want that with Onday shoes. So we have a lot of breathability built into our shoes. And I struggle to get them to smell, to be honest. Like I really do. Like it's a great shoe. And I think it's a lot due to the breathability and the quality of the materials. We didn't cheap out on the materials of the product either. It's like a really well constructed shoe. It's gone through all the testing you can do in a factory from a quality perspective. So it's not, that a lot of thought and care went into the shoe. And while I'm new to the shoe industry, my partner has been in it his entire life. He's his father owned a manufacturing facility at one point before China and Vietnam kind of took over from the United States. But there's a lot of generational experience that's gone into this shoe design.
Cool. I noticed too when I've been trying these on, wearing it everywhere, whether if it's just out going shopping, on walks, the gym.
I can see they're worn. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, really worn to the fact that, I have a lot of barefoot shoes. Mind you, I'll be transparent. This podcast is, for fashion and barefoot. So like I've tried several brands already, and I haven't even been in the barefoot shoe myself for not even 2 years, but this checks off a lot of what I really prefer, which is, something that's athletic, stylish, and really has that capability for me to display my toes well. So just knowing that there was a brand like yours with Onday that had that built-in toe spacer, that was, I think, very, very genius of you for having this. And you saw the market potential of distinguishing yourself. So that's the cool part. Plus, it's so easy to put on. At times, that's the last thing you want to do, man. It's like if you're out in a hurry, it's like "Oh, I gotta put on shoes, but this, boom, boom, you're out the door. So it's great, and this is just your first version, on day one. So I can't imagine what you have in store for future models and collections that you have, which I'm sure you probably are brewing up right now. But that's cool. You said that we
We
were
do,
talking
we do.
previously about a women's line because the on day ones, isn't it men's and women's, or do you have a women's line as well?
Yeah, so men's and women's are launched. They're both live on the website. The initial run was men's, but it's the same shoe. We just ran a test order of men's to test the market, but the women's were very close behind, and they just launched on the website not too long ago. So we're fully live with the men's and women's on the website. And we do have we're probably launching another shoe. We'll see, but it's going to be sometime next year. But it's exciting. I think people are going to love it.
Kind of, I guess this is another question I always ask people is like, what are some of your favorite aspects of your shoe? You probably did hit on it, but personally, what are some of your favorite aspects of the on day ones that you like?
So like I wanted a shoe that allowed my toes to splay. I wanted a built-in toe spacer, and I also wanted to look stylish. So I haven't bought another pair of shoes in a very, very long time. I've been wearing the Onday prototype for well over a year and a half. I think it was a year and a half now. Yeah, over a year and a half. And it's just like my favorite shoe. It's I think the best part about it is that it turned out to be what I wanted it to be. I really wanted to be able to feel that toe splay and like really feel your toes like, dig into the ground and like activate and spread and get that extra balance. And like I play tennis and I'm gonna do everything in them. So for me, taking an idea to something that I actually want to wear all the time and do wear all the time, um, has been just really rewarding. I don't know how else to really say it, but if I had to pick like a feature of the shoe that I really like, just from a looks perspective, I think the outsole is really cool. Just the pyramid tread that we put on there. There's nothing else out there like it, and it's super grippy and like it looks pretty edgy too, without being like
Yeah.
too edgy. I think like it's not something that people are gonna look at and be like that's too like Balenciaga or like too like kind of edgy for me. It's like just on the edge there of like edgy, but like also just a normal, cool, good looking shoe. Also, like just the compliments I've gotten from some of the people in the market. Like, there's a lot of people that have reached out that I'm like surprised to be like people with enormous reach and athletic world and the media world. It's been pretty cool to have that sort of reaction, and our social media following doesn't reflect it, but we're talking to some like really cool people.
Yeah, no, dude, it's crazy. I saw the champ Senri Cejudo like trying it on. I was like, oh, dude, that's dope. And him giving like
Yeah,
a
yeah,
upfront like real life like reaction to wearing it. That's and him knowing that because I mean MMA fighters understand like they're on their feet all the time, and with the amount of time
yep,
that they have to think about recovery, I think that's one aspect that this kind of helps solves them. It's like, hey, this is great. You can wear this all day, and so yeah, I think that's brilliant of you getting him on there.
yeah. And I think just like fighters in general, like and gymnasts or like parkour athletes, just people that like really have to use all their bodies in like different ways all the time. Like having strength through that type of range of motion, all the time, and having control of your body, like I think those sorts of people really kind of get it faster than other people do too, because a lot of people like look at their foot and they're like, my feet are sore. They don't realize that it's because there's muscles in your foot. They're tired, they get sore, they stretch just like any other muscle in the foot. But athletes of that caliber in those categories understand that there's little tiny tendons, little tiny bones, and little tiny muscles in there that are all working together. And it's not that your feet are sore because they're just sore. The muscles are tired, and they're strengthening and stretching at the same time. Anyway, a little bit of a ramble there, but
I know you're pretty big on educating on your website and showing the benefits of barefoot shoes and even like foot health and whatnot. So, what are some of the benefits of barefoot shoes in general that you really like to share on your website and to clients or even people on the internet or in person? What are some of the benefits that you love to share about why it's important to look into barefoot shoes?
Yeah, I think there's a few like really big things that come out, and I think everybody in the barefoot shoe industry kind of hawks on them. But obviously the biggest one, or one of the biggest ones, is the narrow toe box versus a wide toe box. If your shoes don't have room to let your toes splay and create that extra surface area for balance, then your the muscles in your foot are not activating correctly. And you can look up videos of people that can move their toes just like they move their hands. Like I personally can't do that still, despite doing like 10 PT there to try to do it. I think one of the other big things that's really overlooked and not talked about enough is the toe spring in running shoes, the curvature upwards.
Yeah.
When it's just, all you have to do is look at your hands and foot and see that, the hinges go this way, your joints go this way, not the other way around. And to create power out of the bottom of your foot and create the tension to allow your foot to propel you off the ground, you need your toes to be able to curl down. Watch your dog or your cat run, or like go on YouTube and watch like a video of an animal running. Like they're digging into the ground. And the human foot was designed to do the same thing. And the toe spring that's, so preached about in running communities and Adidas and Hoka and all that is, pretty sad to watch from my perspective. I'm sure yours too. And then obviously everyone else talks about the over cushioning of the shoes. I think anyone watching this podcast probably already knows, but you're numbing your foot. You're not getting that proprioceptive feedback that your body needs. And you just take those three things that I just mentioned together and you've destroyed your foot, and in the long term created detrimental damage. And I don't know, you could call it proprioceptive amnesia, whatever you want. But like I talked about earlier in our podcast here, my hand and wrist, when I broke it, forgot how to move, literally could not move. I had to go to PT for weeks to learn how to move my fingers and grip again. You keep your foot in over cushioned shoes your whole life, and you end up with a foot like LeBron James. Not to knock on him, but like he's well aware of his foot problems now. He's addressed them with toe spacers and different therapies, which is really cool to see. And I hope he talks about it. I hope he talks about it more. And then I think the final piece that I would talk about, and I could go on and on, but I think the saddest part is children, because I very much remember going to shoe stores and shoe salesmen being like, oh, the cleat's supposed to be snug, your toes are supposed to be tight, you're not supposed to be able to move, and that's terrible. And especially because children's feet are growing at the same time, and not all families have the money to buy kids new shoes. Also, kids aren't always going to speak up, even if the shoe is too small, because they're just used to it at that point. And to a certain age, your bones are still somewhat malleable and cartilaginous, and they're going to grow into the form that they've been put in and create lifelong damage that you frankly can't really. I think that's where a lot of young men get their tailored bunions and girls get the bunions. And I think that is probably one of the biggest tragedies. And I think that's probably why the toe spacer component of Onday shoes will be so eye-opening for so many people that have some degree of foot and toe deformation.
Yeah. Ever since, when my two kids, I switched them over to barefoot shoes, and like it's crazy how many times I had to give away their
Rock
regular
on. Good.
conventional shoes, right? But I remember them going back into conventional shoes, and this is not even like a year. Okay, they have been getting into barefoot shoes, but my oldest is the one who is more particular of knowing her feet, and like it's too narrow, and she always feels a relief. She tells me it's just wearing wide toe box shoes, and that's I think an eye opening for me as a parent. Knowing that I'm giving them the best foundationally from the ground up.
Yeah.
I wish I myself learned about it, but I think that's why I'm doing this podcast, to create more awareness for people like you and I, and hopefully for more others that, yeah, it does start at a young age, when it's the most important, because it's just going to be a compounding effect. That's years that you have to overcome and fix. So imagine
Yep.
people in the 70s, 60s. Yeah, that's where you talk about that perception amnesia of not knowing even balance. Like people lose balance because their feet are so weak. That's the crazy part. Like people don't understand. Like falls could be avoided if people had balance, and the balance comes from, like you were talking about, the tripod. of the foot, right? So yeah, that's why I love having these conversations with you and I, because
Mhm.
um, it's the more people who are out there and really spreading awareness and educating, I think the more we can really hopefully make a big impact against the modern footwear giants. So uh, next question for you is, what's your goals for Onday Shoes for the next 5, 10 years? I know you just started, but like, what's your you have a long term goal, but just 5, 10 years, kind of give us briefly like what you have in store, probably.
Yeah. So I, I started Onday with the full intention to build something greater and to enter the space in a big way. I believe in what we're doing, and I believe that the toes, like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, I believe that the toe spacer piece will open up a lot of people's eyes. And if we can reach enough people, I think we can really educate the market. And I think at the very least, I want Hyundai to grow to a place where people, are kind of noticing us in the marketplace and saying, oh yeah, that brand out there, Hyundai or Vivo or Zero Shoes, they're really onto something. And, maybe Nike and Adidas and those brands aren't so good for my feet, actually. Like, I want to be part, I want Hyundai to be a part of that tide that changes the mind. And, there's so many inspirational people, I think, in our little niche space here. I could rattle off a few of their names, and a few of them have been on this podcast. But in 5 years, I would like to be a household name in the barefoot shoe industry at the very least, and to have really changed and helped a lot of people's lives. Because toe spacers made a big difference for me, and I think I'm really hoping that it's the missing link for a lot of other people too, and that we can get out there in a big enough way to get enough people to start changing their minds to the point where, you know, maybe in 50, 100 years, people are like, oh, they were Nike and Adidas are in history books. And they're saying, look at these clown shoes people were wearing back in the day. They thought were good at their feet. And the kids reading those books will be like, man, what were they thinking? Just like we look at some decisions our parents made and our grandparents made, and we're like, what were they thinking? I want I want to help Zero and Vivo and the other brands that are out there doing that. I want to be part of that conversation that's helping change that. That's really what I want to do.
And where do you see the barefoot shoe industry evolving in the future?
I think it's pretty cool that there's some NBA players wearing Zero Shoes now. I know I mentioned their brand a couple times. Very inspirational brand out there in the barefoot shoe world. So I think it's amazing they got an NBA contract out there. I think it's very interesting that Vibram is kind of making a comeback with some of their high end fashion partnerships. So I think there's an awakening. And I actually, I have an interesting theory about Crocs. I think part of the reason Crocs have become very popular is because they are a very comfortable wide toe box shoe. They don't market it, they don't talk about it, but they are. And I think, Gen Z, and in particular, who are kind of they don't, I'm not Gen Z myself, but they don't seem as concerned with, the narrow toe boxes. Those sorts of shoes are wearing kind of more, I think, like Italian, or not Italian, but like kind of French clog looking type shoes that are a little bit bigger. And you see kids wearing Crocs. Like, I lived in New York for 9 years. There's kids wearing Crocs in the street in New York everywhere. Like, oh, I think Crocs might be actually one of the biggest secret barefoot shoe brands out there that's like influencing this. And I think in, 15, 20 years, like, that's going to be a thing, because those kids that are wearing Crocs right now are going to grow up and be like, my feet are way more comfortable in Crocs. And they're just going to Google wide shoes, and they're going to find all the brands out there, and these brands will get bigger. And unless something's changed recently, the CAGR on barefoot shoe brands is faster than the general sneaker market as a whole. So if that trend continues and big shoe doesn't come out swinging, or with some lawsuits or something, try to take some of the bigger brands in our space down, then I think it'll become a bigger thing. And frankly, I think Nike and Adidas and Hoka and On will probably change their tune a little bit, because they did. Not a lot of people remember this, but Nike did change their tune back when Born to Run first came out. They had commercials about barefoot health, and the shoe, the Nike Free, I believe, was the shoe, and it wasn't a wide toe box shoe, but it did have much less cushion than it's available now, and it was a great shoe. I loved it, because I didn't know better back then, but it was a good shoe. And I think if the trends continue the way they're looking, I think we can expect the barefoot space to continue to grow in a big way.
I think like the early days of Nike, I think I want to be, hopefully I'm right, but the early days of Nike, like the running shoes were minimalist style, like very thin insoles. And that's how they were, the track stars were running with these minimal insoles instead of now these padded ones with,
Hmm.
carbon fiber or whatever you want to put in there. But that's what they were running with back then. And so it's just crazy to see the evolution of, you know, I think we've probably shared or, liked each other's posts on like how there are these crazy looking shoes that like say, oh, these are proprioception shoes where you can feel more. I'm like, yeah, it's
Yep.
called being barefoot. You don't have to create a shoe that's having more proprioception. Get barefooted, go outside and touch grass or something like. But so it's just wild. It's they're marketing geniuses, obviously. So they're gonna always have to create new spins on trends and fads. So I feel like the bigger brands are seeing and coming out with these so-called barefoot or minimalist type of variation of shoes. And I think, like I said, with the athletes that we have coming up, with Ronaldo, with LeBron James,
Yeah.
that just they're them being out there training in shoes outside of the scope of you know mainstream media. They know something that most of the people don't know about, and it's probably because they don't want it. They're signing contracts, so they have to wear those shoes. But the outside of it, they're training with something else, which is that's where you're like, oh, he knows he's onto something.
It's true. It's true. And toe spacers, actually a lot more people know about them than I thought when I kind of got into this. I mean, recently Taylor Swift and her fiance were on a podcast talk about her after show foot care routine, which includes toe spacers. But one of my buddies, one of my close friends in New York, works for a company in the percussive space that massage therapy devices, the motorized kind. I can't say names, but one of the bigger ones, and he knows a lot of folks in the athletic industry. And this guy I met, one of the trainers for an NBA player. I won't name names, but he was with me, and we're out in New York, and I was wearing Ondays. This was pre-launch, and he's like, "What are those?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's my shoe. It's my toe spacer shoe." And he pulls a pair of toe spacers out of his bag. He's like, "Dude, I carry these with me everywhere. I train so and so athlete with them." And I'm like, really? Like that? Like, so it's definitely making its way into mainstream athletics. And I think, there's a couple of these brands out there that like market barefoot training exercises. I think they've probably been on your podcast, and, they've got, some of them I think have hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram. Like there's a decent audience of people that are aware of this, and they're doing a really good job of educating, and it's making its way into the highest caliber athletes out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you probably have seen also like on social or on clips where athletes are training barefooted without shoes in general, and I think that's also another key indicator that they're always working off season, taking care of their feet. So I know there's a coach, Mike G. I don't know if you're Mike G. He's based on, but he's always teaching and getting athletes to get on barefoot to train, and he's a proponent of barefoot barefoot training. So I think that's also another aspect is more trainers, athletic trainers are noticing the impact of taking care of the foot so that when they're on the court, then they can wear these tools. They're specialized to their basketball shoes. Cause yeah, I mean, these athletes aren't, they're wearing their specialized shoes that they're contracted with only during the game, but it's what are they doing outside?
It cut out there a little bit, Ian. Can't hear you.
Sorry. I was just saying that a lot of the trainers nowadays are seeing the benefits of training barefooted with their athletes and how that's kind of translating into even,
Yeah, yeah.
off the court too. But I just see shoes as a tool for, especially for athletes, but they have to earn that right by training the foot so that they can go and play in it. So, I mean, you know,
Yes.
yeah. So yeah, that's kind of what I've as an athlete myself. That's where I kind of was like, what? That's the stance of footwear is that if you have strong feet, a good foundation, then you can wear shoes because the shoes will help solidify what you did outside of these, so that you can have a longer impact of it. So
I agree. I agree. The translation of, you probably know about more about this than I do because you work in it every day, but like the activation of your big toe up the arch and the muscles it connects to on the ups up the inner of your leg and all the way up to your groin, your pelvic floor, and then into your lower back. I mean, it translates in so many different areas that can prevent injury and can help improve athletic performance, that it's just shocking that this stuff isn't more mainstream. And I really hope like yourself and other professionals in the field like get out there and like, because if the athletes start talking about it, everybody's going to follow suit,
Hmm.
and it can become more mainstream. And I've seen some stuff out there that talks about like how grip strength translates to longevity, and there's another one out there that talks about foot strength translating to longevity. And I think one of the more interesting things I've kind of delved into along this journey too is my own grip strength. And I've like started doing like dead hangs from a pull-up bar for as long as I can, and that my shoulder pain is gone. And
Really?
it happened a lot the way the barefoot training helped me with my hip and leg pain too. So I think, just the more body awareness someone has and the more they focus on the little things rather than maybe some of the big compound, big movements, like the better off people are going to be. Because I know, you throw young guys in the gym when we're in high school and we're training for sports. They're like, oh, how much can you squat? Like, that's what matters. It's not all that matters. It matters sometimes, but I'm finding that I feel better at my age now than I did when I was in college. I have less leg pain, less hip pain, less lower back pain, less shoulder pain. I feel better now than I did then. And that's not how it's supposed to be.
Weird. The things you find out when you're in your 30s.
I know, right? And you think you know everything when you're a kid, and then you just keep learning, I guess. That's how it goes.
Yeah. Well, man, love to have you share with the audience how people can learn more about what you're doing there on these shoes, and what, I guess, where people can purchase these on these shoes with the toe spacers. So if you want to share social, email, website, and then of course, even give us a sneak peek of what's coming ahead with your brand.
Yeah. So we you can purchase our shoes at ondayshoes.com. Our social handles are all the same too. It's Onday Shoes. We do have a exciting product coming out that is, I would say, I can't talk about it too much, but we can talk about it another time. But we do have another product launch coming up sometime next year. It's gonna be really exciting. Maybe we can talk about it again. But our goal is to create a portfolio of products for everyone to enjoy. And there's a variety of, I guess, things that go into creating a shoe that's good for everybody. And we're talking with some podiatrists at the moment of what's kind of right for everybody. So we're expanding the product portfolio. This is as much as I can say is we're expanding the product portfolio to match up with every type of consumer, right? I don't know how else to say it, but you can follow us at Onday Shoes on TikTok, on Instagram, and our website again is ondayshoes.com.
Cool. Well, hey, man, I appreciate you, Brent, for sharing this. And of course, I'm showcasing this and helping make a people's difference about toe spaces and shoes. Who would have thought? But there is such thing as a shoe, and that's on day. So appreciate it, man, for helping on through the podcast.
You too, Ian. Really appreciate you having us on Stretch to Go, and looking forward to catching up with you again sometime soon. Let's stay in touch.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Cool.